I'm Josh, co-founder and CEO of Zuplo. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Cool. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly there?
You nailed it, Josh.
I know it is the
Right.
coolest last. Sorry, terrible pun there. From SmarterX, and we're going to talk about well, first of all what you do at SmarterX, a little bit about yourself. So I'll let you do the intro in a second. But we're actually going to explore your recent transition from using Google's Apigee gateway over to Zuplo, what you're doing with that. So that's kind of the agenda for today. So I'll let you start by telling us a little bit about your background, how you get to be doing what you're doing, and what you do, what SmarterX does, and what you do there.
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess I'll start maybe with SmarterX. So we're a technology company, and we focus on deeply analyzing consumer packaged goods for retailers and for brands. And we help them kind of get deep analysis into products and then meet all kinds of regulatory requirements and run programs to make things that people want to buy. Um, So I joined SmarterX as a director of DevOps. So I kind of head up DevOps at SmarterX. And in my background, I've been a software engineer in Austin for about 15 years, both sort of in the platform engineering and DevOps space.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's a little about me.
Awesome, awesome. And so I'm actually a little bit more curious about SmarterX and what you do. Can you give us like a real world example of what that means? Like to a consumer who buys consumer packaged goods, how does the work of SmarterX, how would you describe it to a friend at a bar or a coffee shop?
Yeah, yeah. One I like to use is so we have some customers today that they have hardware that we provide them in the back of the store. And one thing we help them do is um, dispose of and categorize things that they get back that are returned or need to be shipped off or things like that. We help them categorize that stuff correctly so that it's environmentally safe, safe for the people there, safe for the people on the road, and that type of thing. So as they bring stuff back and need to ship it out or need to send it to waste management or whatever, they scan each product and we tell them based on the ingredients, not just based on some um, you know key value database somewhere, but we've actually analyzed all these products and their ingredients and their adjacency to other things to determine whether that's flammable, whether it's safe to be on the road, or whether it needs to be in bin A or bin B. Um, so that's one way that we do this. Another way that we do it that's kind of fun is so a lot of retailers will have programs where they want to sell clean products to people that were cleanly made or environmentally safe. So we can help um, brands develop products that meet those specifications by helping them analyze like what kind of ingredients they're putting in the things that they sell to meet those programs.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Awesome. That makes sense. That's cool. So you obviously have an API because you know you're using Apigee, you know, using Zuplo.
All right.
Tell us what's the API for in that world? Like what does that do?
Yeah. So we started building an API to we obviously we offer the ability for a lot of these companies or vendors to send us files and we'll analyze that data. But we wanted to enable a more transactional approach for the technology and IT organizations that are in these companies. So we started building an API that will allow the retailer or the brand to send us whatever data they have. And we use a lot of AI to extrapolate on that data, and will ultimately come up and make decisions based on whatever they can give us. Make a decision on what is safe to do with that product or what that product contains. So we wanted them to be able to do that transactionally to send us batches and get data back in real time, because the alternative to us is doing it with essentially shipping flat files back and forth, or actually having a human in the loop and waiting for weeks or whatever to get back a result from a vendor.
Got it.
So we want to close that loop and make it faster.
Nice, nice. Okay. And so obviously having an API, you folks recognize that it's a good idea to use like a gateway and API management products. We probably don't need to go into that into too much detail. Maybe we'll explore it a little bit later. But I know you were using Apigee previously before you discovered Zuplo. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started to look for an alternative?
Definitely, yeah. So maybe it was last summer around this time last year, we started to kind of analyze this. The first reason was that for what we were using, it was very expensive for us
Mm,
to use Apigee. We had an annual contract with them. We had a lot of support, which wasn't getting used, and a lot of features. I think the maybe the main one of the main things with cost was there were lots of features that we just couldn't get rolling in the team and used properly, which made it an expensive buy. One of the things that, as an operations person, I didn't like that kind of led us to looking was that we had a hybrid. We had sort of a hybrid model, so we hosted infrastructure in GCP to do this, but it's a hybrid cloud model, so there's also half of it in the other in the cloud. Um, the part of the reason that that was difficult was that there's a complex learning curve. You kind of need to know which parts live in which place so that your team can maintain it and make sure that it's stable, but also that the developers can navigate it. And I think the object model and the things that were in Apigee were difficult to get onto our team. And really, the final thing that sort of the straw that broke the camel's back was that we had a couple of production outages that we had, frankly, very bad production support uh, from the team. And so we were kind of like, we're paying this much. We need to be able to support this better, and there's probably better solutions out there. So let's look.
got it. Awesome. And so you decided to go with Zuplo in the end, and you're in production now, right, with Zuplo?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about some of the reasons. Why did you pick Zuplo? Why was that the preferred choice?
Yeah, so we we actually analyzed, and I won't go into detail on all of it, but we were very careful when we were analyzing this, because we wanted to be very careful not to repeat the same issue. I think the purchase from Apogee goes way back beyond me and some of my colleagues. Um, but we kind of made a grid of things that were important, and um, you know, some of the things that were important were support. Like we wanted to make sure that we could have a really good closed loop with the team to support us in both migration and beyond. Um, that the cost model would scale with us, so not necessarily like we could buy a whole bunch of features and then grow into those features, but we could buy the sliver of what we need and grow into it. And developer experience was also huge because we're small. Our DevOps team is small. Our platform team is small. So we needed to be able to educate and kind of roll into a developer flow, that already existed and make it easy for those folks to like navigate it by themselves without learning a giant, new set of tools.
Yeah.
Um, those are the main things.
So, I mean, if I'm hearing you talked about Apigee, you mentioned things like the object model was hard for people to learn and understand. So there was a high learning curve. It sounds like you had some reliability issues. You were pretty concerned about support. You wanted to feel like you engaged with the team, and then you focused on DevX. And the outcome is you picked Zuplo. So I'm gonna put force words into your mouth here and say, so it sounds like you think Zuplo is offering a better developer experience, has an easier learning curve, and you were impressed by the support. I hope I got that right. It's going to be really embarrassing if you argue. Tell me.
Actually, no, yeah, that's very right. I think where we noticed that was taking off was at the beginning of the year. We were sort of at the tail end of prototyping. In fact, Zuplo came in very late in the game. We had prototypes, maybe four or five others, very very fast, and we were trying to tick the boxes. When we got Zuplo, when we knew that it was probably going to be the solution for us when we we were kind of building a prototype, little proof of concepts, and we just kind of kept going. We were like another guy who I worked with was just in a flow state building stuff out, and he's like, I mean, I'm past all this other stuff we were doing before. I'm down here now, and we're like, well, how are you? Did you run into any problems? They're like, yeah, but they were pretty good about getting back to me. And so we're like, well, then why are we doing anything else? Let's just keep going.
Awesome. So you folks are sort of almost enjoying the process of working with a gateway.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that. You don't want to fight with your tools, but it's a surprise when you're delighted by them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not to be boastful. We want to be humble here, but it's not the first time we've heard that from customers. We have one of our largest customers actually says for the first time in their history they were a former user of Apigee as well actually, and they said and
Hmm.
their team now competes for tickets if it's a Zuplo ticket, which is not something that happened previously. It was quite the reverse. It's like no one wants that
Yeah.
particular. Sorry to beat up on you, Google. We love you. But anyway,
Yeah.
uh, tell us about the migration. So you guys made the decision to switch. How long did it take? What was that process like? And what were the key steps involved?
Yeah. I think one important thing to point out from that is that we had two simultaneous projects. So one was we were launching a new API, new set of APIs, and we had an existing set of APIs on Apigee. So we were kind of doing both. I think it took us around from end to end. It took us around a month to do the migration. By the time we were doing the migration, we had already sort of started on the development of the new system as well.
Mm.
Um, but in planning for the migration, like I think that the steps that we thought through, what we needed to think through, were about, the first thing was like, obviously when you're working in a system like this, it's documenting your flow, like authentication, like what are the call outs that we need to find. So we looked at our authentication scheme, what systems we used for auth and auth, what what's the contract, the external contract look like? What does the target backend um, processing look like? The mapping kind of to each thing. And for us, an interesting thing was it was mostly like we had a lot of wildcards because it lets you Apigee Apigee kind of lets you do like globbing, which is not necessarily the same thing that the OpenAI spec is going to like let you do.
Mm.
Um, so we kind of picked apart those things and made sure we documented them. We identified custom code resources, code policies that we had. Most of them were out of the box, but we had some custom JavaScript as well and transformations. A common one that I think one that was almost overlooked was target endpoint settings. So like pertaining headers, passing through that type of thing, like how are your endpoints configured. So we aggregated all that. Um, Again, something we almost missed that we came back to in the end that was important was reaching out to, our business, colleagues in the business and saying like, what do you need to see? Because obviously the observability is different, going from one to the other, metrics and things like that. Not just for technology, for ops, but for business ops and rev ops. So we got some input from our account management colleagues and things like that on what they needed to see. Um, we knew that you folks partnered with Mosif, who we also looked into for this. So we actually connected Mosif for some of that work. But it was important that we ask those questions because obviously the observability for the business was really important. And had we not done that, we'd have to kind of go back and retrofit things. Um,
Mm.
so that was useful. And then on the development side, we kind of just we decided, okay, we've got, we know where all the pieces are. We know what the transforms are. Let's pick an endpoint and just start chugging away. So we took the first couple endpoints and kind of went end to end in Zuplo, um, just building them out. And that was where we really got into the nitty gritty of like integrating Auth0 and Stripe and things like that. Um,
Nice.
eh, yeah, yeah, probably. And then the last thing, after we started pushing those through, was like, how do we handle the production cutover? And start getting, once we started getting traction, like, all right, we need to involve the customer and let's start talking about like how we're going to do the production cutover. And from there, it was just kind of rinse, repeat. We just went through each one and tested it and pushed through. A month later, we were done.
Nice. So you say a month. What does a month mean? A month from when you started the project, a month from when you heard about Zuplo to production? Like what is the time frame we're looking at there?
Yeah. Well, like I said, we had both things going on, so it's not quite like when we heard about Zuplo, the first thing we started doing was actually building out our new thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that was also very fast. But in parallel, I think it was a calendar month pretty much. Like we started doing like planning the migration. So from planning to we're code complete. We're waiting on our customers, IT groups to like do their end-to-end testing, and bless it, and then we were good to go.
So you went from a production workload running on Apigee to starting to work with Zuplo, having discovered it, to switching that production load fully over to running on Zuplo in about a calendar month.
That's right.
Wow,
Yep.
that's cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
obviously these projects can typically take a long time, so we're really pleased to hear that. I know, having worked in my past on Azure API management with Microsoft, like these projects could be really involved, and so we spent a lot of time trying to get the experience and the flexibility right so that folks could pull this off. So it's awesome when we hear folks moving. It's not trivial to move a production workload across gateways, right? It can be daunting. Doing it in a month is
No.
is awesome.
Yeah, and I should point out that was with my colleague in DevOps. It's basically one and a half people um
Wow.
moving that over. So, I'm sure we could have done a lot more that if we parallelized even more, we probably could have cut that down. Um, but yeah, it was pretty smooth.
Very nice to hear. And so yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the developer experience and productivity and how you feel about that. But before we do, actually, I know one of the other things that was a factor for you in thinking about moving away from Apigee that you just said was cost. Um, we don't need to name dollar values, but are you willing to share sort of roughly what percentage in terms of ticket price, sticker price savings you made in the transition from Apigee to Zuplo?
Oh yeah. We saved at least 75%
Right.
off of our previous ticket. And I say at least because it was the contract that probably 75% of the contract value, but then we also had to host infrastructure, right?
Right.
And maintain that infrastructure. So if I turn that all to dollars and cents, we're talking even more. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, coming back to sort of usability, what are the main things you feel the differences with Zuplo? If I wanted you to be like quite explicit, why did you feel so much more productive? Why did folks like stick with the project and keep working on it? Like, what was it about the product that was different?
Yeah, man, I think the thing that keeps coming up in my mind, which I know, there's other things around it, but being able to do the TypeScript policies and manipulate everything sort of in the request response flow. Like I know the request response flow also exists in Apigee, um, but I think the model of just being able to take a request, um, literally have inputs and then an output request for each step in that pipeline and give developers the tools and the libraries to just build what they need, um, really really put afterburners on things.
Oh,
um,
really?
yeah, I think probably the biggest example of that is less in the migration and more in the other product implementation. Within like 2 weeks, I initially did a POC. We decided this is what we were going to do. We started working on it, and I handed this off to two other of my colleagues, and they just started writing code and writing their own libraries and stuff like that, and putting it in there. And if there was something they couldn't figure out, it wasn't how do I go to the documentation and figure out what backflip and tunnel I have to crawl through to do it. It was just what code do I need to write for the most part. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that comes to mind. Um, the other thing that's really really nice in terms of developer experience is the branching strategy in preview environments. So the fact that Zuplo generally offers like a main branch, and then working copies for every developer, and then lower environments, whatever, all on separate branches. So it's a very familiar flow to developers.
Yeah.
So when I introduce it to the guys, they're already like, oh, okay, I get it. And plus, then they have preview environments for each one of those branches that they can go test their stuff. So it's like, out of the box, it's a developer flow. So it really helps them own that, which was important again to me and to the operations guys, because it wasn't we have to learn and then teach someone a tool. It was kind of we hand them the keys and they already know what to do. Um, those are the big parts, I think.
That's awesome. The API gateway that gives you Afterburners might be our new marketing slogan, but that's like Top Gun favorite for me there, I think.
Oh,
Um, uh,
nice.
I love it. And how did you find that sort of change the engagement you saw from the team in the product? Did you find folks were more engaged with it than before? Or easier to get people onboarded, like it's stickier for them?
Yes, I mean, so well, like I said, the first people to get a hold of it were the team building the new thing, and like I said, in maybe a week or two after I built the POCs, I kind of walked them through the POCs, recorded some looms, um, and reviewed some code, and then it was basically hands off for me. So they took it and could run with it within a couple of weeks, and then anything. The other important thing I think that you guys did so great was um, the support. Obviously we're on plan where we get a Slack channel. Being
Yeah.
able to work directly with you guys on big issues that we had, if any came up, was great because we could just work through it and get over the hump. Um, so I think that was very sticky. Kept them moving. Um, now there was another developer who also got brought on to manage them after the migration happened, and during the migration he was kind of like picking up and learning it. And so the interesting thing with him was that he had most of the Apigee object model XML, sort of, I don't know what you call it, bespoke kind of thing that they created in his head. So it was almost like, um, once you learned that there wasn't a lot of custom stuff to learn, it was just like going back to your get flow and that type of thing. You kind of unlearned that, then it was just he could just run with it and maintain it himself. Um, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's
No,
where
I
my
think so.
mind went.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. Did you? I think I know the answer to this, but I'll share it with the viewers. Did you use the local development flow primarily, or the web IDE? Like, where did you end up spending your time?
Yeah, well, I think we used a hybrid of both. I used the web UI a whole lot. I really liked that, and especially writing new stuff. But a couple of the devs, so we wrote tests also. That was another great thing. We wrote
Mm.
an entire test suite for all of our policies, which we didn't have before. And a couple of our team members worked locally and wrote and run all those tests locally. So we did a little bit of both, but I think the test suite was a really cool outcome of working locally and developing them there.
Nice. And did you see that we recently announced local step through debugging in VS Code for this?
No,
Okay, so
no, but now I'm not sold.
you can step through your policies in Zuplo now, put a little breakpoint on it in VS Code and step in, go through, see it's a big advance. So I think even another lift. And obviously when you're working
Great.
with Zuplo, you can't help but be working with OpenAPI. Is that something you were already doing at SmarterX? Was this useful to you in any way? What was your feelings about that experience?
Yeah. Well, so I talked to one of the main developers on the integration, or sorry, the migration, and um, for me, starting from a greenfield when I was starting from a greenfield project, it just made sense. It's like that's how we already use OpenAI specs for a lot of our APIs that we throw out in production. So managing them in Swagger Hub and things like that. So the fact that we sort of had to build inside the OAS spec was great because you're getting it for free and you're also getting a functional proxy on top of that.
Yeah.
Um, so it worked really well for us in that way. And then coming from Apigee, we I'm sure that we may have been on a version that they did things differently, but our documentation was primarily based on the OAS spec. But the proxy doesn't necessarily comply with OpenAPI.
Yeah.
So you have two kind of conflicting things. So when we moved it over, we sort of had to take the pieces out that were behaving one way and put them into the OpenAPI spec. But I think that was a benefit because it's sort of that work. You sort of needed to do that anyway to get the good DevX and get kind of the flywheel turning. Um, so we were doing it before, but we couldn't really do it in Apigee. It was only for our docs. So then when we ported it in, we made that change for the better, frankly.
So now you went from this world where you had two things you kind of had to keep in sync, right? Like the gateway could be set up as a world of fiction that was not represented by the docs. Whereas with Zuplo, both are powered by the same document. So you're more or less assured that they're going to be doing to some degree the same thing, right? There's just one point of management. Is that fair?
That's right. That's right. That's a really good way of putting it. It's kind of you're collapsing those things down into one source of truth, which is the way that it should be. And also like the wild carding I mentioned earlier,
Mm.
um, you can you can get into trouble when you start globbing those URLs together. So having to explicitly lay them out is good all around. So it sort of forced some conventions that are really positive changes into one place.
Awesome. Awesome. What are the biggest lessons you learned during this whole process of switching? What advice would you give to anyone else considering something similar?
Yeah. Um, well, one choice that we made early on, which was really important, was communicating really early with the customers. We got in touch with our customers really early to work with them on the migration. Um, Introduce them to Zuplo at early stages so that we could, kind of test the proxy. Um, I would definitely do that. The other thing was consider your observability strategy. We had not great observability from a DevOps perspective on on the Apigee proxy. We got what we could get. When we moved over, we had kind of a lot more available to us with regard to logs and things like this and tracing and stuff. So we um, consider ahead of time what your observability is going to look like after the fact and make plans to integrate it properly once it comes down the road. And finally, like I mentioned before, like consider product marketing and operations and what they need to see. Um, you can get a lot of information and a lot of integrations out of Zuplo. Um, there may be more for them than you had in the previous, whatever your previous world was. So, we partnered with Mosif, like I said, and we've got several other integrations to get the things that we need. But had we not considered that in the early stages, we'd be retrofitting it and we wouldn't have that data. So,
So actually,
I
the
think those were good.
integrations you folks are using today, are you using one of our logging integrations? Is Mosif one of them? You've got that. You're using the Mosif plugin?
We are. We're using the Mosif plugin to get like request analytics, um, and we use Stripe, we use Auth0, and I'm missing one, but we use a few different migration or different integrations that are really helpful. And some of it too we can do inside the policies. Like I think we integrate with cloud storage at some level for doing like BigQuery analytics,
Yeah.
and we can do that within the code. So that kind of came for free, which is great.
Nice, nice. Well, look, I think I've asked you a lot of questions here. We're super grateful for your partnership on this and for joining us on this recording. Um, Thanks for being an awesome customer and an awesome partner, Kevin, and thanks for spreading the word about Zuplo. We really appreciate you and SmarterX and the whole team. And I know the team enjoyed working with you as well on the support channel that you folks got in your enterprise contract.
Yeah.
So thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be a customer.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.